Hey everybody, this is Perch, and here's a viewer question here, which kind of touches on something that I've asked in the past, but now I'm being asked here. It says, "Hey Perch, I love your channel, and more importantly, I love your optimism. Thank you." Yeah, it is this is a very optimistic channel in many ways. Anyway, love your optimism, Perch. Who is the next Stan Lee? It feels like comic books really need somebody who can be that champion, somebody who can get out there, somebody who can talk about how great comics are, get people inspired, and really push a positive, happier mode for comics. Who can be that person? The mail goes on, but I'm going to leave it there. I've asked this question before in this channel, like who is the next Stan Lee? Because I agree with this premise. I do think comics needs a Stan Lee. In the world of tech, they would call this person an evangelist. Comics needs its evangelist. It needs somebody who's going to go out there into the world and is going to basically promote how cool it is. Well, a lot of people forget that once upon a time, Apple came onto the scene. It was a cool computer, everything else. But then the heat kind of died down from Apple. And when Steve Jobs returned to the company, part of what Jobs did was to be an evangelist, not just for technology, but also for experiences, and in particular, Apple experiences. But the thing that was so striking about Jobs is that Jobs felt like he was a cool, forward-thinking guy. In reality, I mean, Jobs had a great team around him. People like Johnny Ive have gotten just not anywhere close to enough credit for everything that Ive has done. But there's a lot of people within the Apple ecosystem that made the company what it was. Jobs was just very good at getting out there and being that face for it. And of course, it helps that computers are a multi-billion-dollar field and growing all the time. And comics are, of course, not. So if you have that ability to inspire and command attention and everything else, why would you bother with comics? You would be moved over to movies and other things. And I think the companies you would work for would move you as well. Several years ago, many years ago now, well, I don't know about many, but Sana Amanat was thought of by Disney as somebody who could be that evangelist into bigger things. They felt like she was bigger than comics. And you saw her positioned to give a bunch of interviews and meet Obama and kind of all this other stuff. And then, of course, some things got in the way of that. And there was some issues. And, she's pretty much MIA at this point. And that evangelist kind of aura is over. There's a bigger story there. But anyway, it is what it is. So who is that person now? When I did this video before, I said Kirkman was possibly that person. Some people always mention Kevin Smith. I think for a lot of reasons, Kevin Smith is not that person. And I think it's very clear, if for no other reason, then you can look at the handling of the Masters of the Universe, not debacle, but the way that all went down. By the way, because some people have hit on this, I've talked about She-Ra in the past. People are like, why'd you dump on She-Ra? Look, again, if you like the shows, you like the shows. But in general, what you're hoping for, whether it's a comic or it's music or it's movies or it's TV, what you're hoping for is to, what they often call in tech, I don't know what the word for it is in media, you want to run the bases. And what they mean by that is that everyone likes you. There's no big hate. You don't get pummeled on Rotten Tomatoes. There's no group out there that decides to tank you either as with a bunch of bots or legitimate lots of people who hate your product. It's one of those things where you want to kind of thread the needle of not offending any one group and being able to kind of rise above it and come out with a universally liked product. Doesn't mean it has to be the best product ever, but if you look at things like Star Wars, the Rian Johnson Star Wars film, now it made a lot of money for Disney. So on one hand, Disney's not unhappy about that movie. And there are people out there who enjoy that film, who got what they wanted out of it, and they like that experience, and they're good. There's those people are happy and satisfied. But even if you're one of those people or you're Disney, you didn't love the big controversy over the film. You did not love the hatred that thing got. Even though the movie made lots of money, you would have liked to have done without that hatred. So it can't be considered a full run the bases experience because it wasn't there. Kevin Smith has some aspects where he clearly revels in being kind of a geek and being kind of invested into that geek culture, but he is also polarizing, and he's been polarizing for a while. It's not just this Masters of the Universe situation. He's been a figure that, not everyone always gets behind. He doesn't naturally draw all groups to him in the way that others have been able to. Stan Lee, keep in mind, after time went by, he certainly a lot more negative things came out. Obviously, he had the feud with Jack Kirby and other places, but Stan Lee, from a broader normies perspective, was pretty. People liked to see him. They liked his little cameos in the MCU. It was he just had that presence to him. Like I said, I think Kevin Smith doesn't have that to him. I think Robert Kirkman is close, but Robert Kirkman is never going to be supported by Marvel and DC. And unfortunately, you need at least a little bit of passive support. I think Kirkman didn't exactly burn bridges. I think if Kirkman had not been so successful with AMC and what he did at Image, then I think you would have seen Marvel do a lot more behind the scenes to kind of screw with the guy. But as a result, he got very, very popular with Walking Dead. He started to put Invincible on the map, do other things. And so Marvel had a hard time really crapping on him. And keep in mind, they did try. There were a couple cons where there was a lot of kind of backhanded statements made at Kirkman from the Marvel direction, the Marvel leadership direction. But they didn't stick because he was out there putting out Walking Dead and people more or less like that. And it was getting a TV show and it was becoming a really popular thing. And Marvel, in their way, also does not want to be seen as a company that takes shots at something that's popular. They tend to just quietly ignore it, which is what they've been doing with Kirkman. So who can be that role? I think that Marvel thought that was going to be C.B. Cebulski when they had him replace Axel Alonso. It was not to be. I think that the problem is right now in comics, nobody really fits that bill. And either because there were a couple of people who had that ability, but they, quickly were sabotaged or attacked by other people, or some of our popular personalities within comics have succumbed to, taking shots. Once upon a time, Joe Quesada was seen as kind of somebody who could be that role. He definitely had it. And then a combination of certainly the Spider-Man stuff. But in recent years, Quesada had taken to, until he was apparently asked to stop, making little kind of snide backhanded comments on Twitter from time to time. Now, granted, he was making it against, a quote unquote villain from the comic industry. He was really poking at the Comicsgate people, but you can't be that positive ambassador and poke at anyone. That's the thing people, constantly screw up. And they've been screwing that part up for a few years now. They don't get that if you're going to be that role, even if it's a popular person to attack, you can't do it. You got to steer clear of all of it. Controversy is no good. It goes back to kind of what I was saying about how media wants to run the bases. It doesn't want to be involved in any controversy, even if you're quote unquote in the right. You can't be involved in any of it, and this has been the problem. So who's left? Dan Didio was never going to be that figure. Jim Lee could be that, but Jim Lee seems astoundingly uninterested in playing that role. He shows up every now and then. He does some kind of fan favorite, but Jim Lee really strikes me as a guy who would really just kind of like to draw comics. He wants to be involved in, doing covers and things here or there. He doesn't want to give speeches. He doesn't want to get in front of people. He doesn't seem like he has that personality. So, it's not going to be Eric Stevenson. I mean, unless the group that he's trying to really kind of get onto his side are a bunch of kind of 18 to 21-year-old co-eds. We've got, it could be Todd, although Todd also has some legacy baggage, I think, in him. And then beyond that, you have a wide number of people that are loved by a segment of the audience, but hated by other segments. That's not going to be great for an ambassador either. So who can be that person? I don't know. I don't think comics has it. And like I said, I think anyone with that natural charisma and ability to lead is going to be kind of scooped up and kind of punted into movies. Jeff Johns, who of course now has controversies via Ray Fisher and other things on him, he had that ability. I think for a while, he was seen as kind of that guy as well. But look at what happened to him. They quickly scooped him up and had him involved in movie projects. They basically said, hey, we want to take your, whatever it is, this ability that you have to kind of inspire, lead, or get people to naturally trust what you say, and we want to put it where the bigger money is, in movies. and that's what they did. Right now, there isn't somebody, but maybe it's better to talk about what that person needs to be. I think that person needs to be positive, even in the face of irrefutable evidence. Now, positive doesn't mean a liar or ignorant. I think anyone who's going to come up and say the comic industry is better than it's ever been, that's simply not true. It isn't better than it's ever been, unless unless you're doing the math very, very wrong, and enough people know that that's not truthful. It doesn't ring true. But that doesn't mean you can't still be positive about comics. You should be able to say, hey, look, I love comics. I think comics can get bigger. I think they can grow. I think they can do amazing things, and I'm here for it. I have confidence that if we work hard, if we put in sweat and some blood, hopefully no tears, that we are going to bring comics into another golden age. To some extent, that's how Mark Millar comes across when you read his newsletters. He is enthusiastic about his product. He likes what he's doing. He tends to be happy. Once again, it's a guy who, I think not half, that's way too strong, but there's a decent amount of people in the industry that had their knives out just waiting for him. They were jealous over the Netflix deal. And I think they just, there's people who don't like him. There are people who wake up every day, Rich Johnson, who look for new ways to screw with a guy, and that's going to be that's unfortunately going to be hard to overcome if you're trying to become an ambassador for all of comics. Now you might ask yourself, does comics even need an ambassador? And I would say, yeah, in fact, probably more than ever. Comics does need that role. It needs somebody or somebodies, some people who are going to be able to come out and say, look, we're not going to lie to you. We're not going to pretend that everything is perfect. We're not going to pretend that, everyone who is happy counts and everybody who isn't happy doesn't count. But we also believe that comics are amazing. They're part of our life, and they're going to be part of our life 50 years from now. And we are going to, carry that torch, and we're going to make comics into something great. Again, I think there's a lot of people out there. I mentioned Miller. I think Scott Snyder is a very different person. You've heard the interviews with Sean Murphy. I think he definitely feels that. A lot of people I've talked to have that feeling of loving comics and want to do more to it. The challenge is, and this is what the industry maybe has to grapple with a little bit, is there's a handful of people out there who basically take the position of, if I'm not benefiting from this positive situation, if I'm not getting anything for myself out of it, then I'm going to tear down the people trying. And that's why when you see people, look at Snyder. Snyder has people regularly who crap on him, many times behind the scenes, many times in Facebook groups. There's a decent amount of people that are just kind of waiting for the moment where they can, once again accuse him of being sexist and other things. There's people sitting on that, pouncing on that. So unfortunately, if we're going to say that there needs to be some positive stuff, there needs to be somebody out there kind of championing how great comics can be and be inspirational to everyone else. If you have a handful of people behind the scenes who are looking at that and saying, anyone who makes any forward progress, I'm going to try and sabotage. One, that's going to discourage a lot of people from trying, and two, it's going to create this noise. It's going to create this conflict that, frankly, is a poison to any of this stuff actually getting done. But that's what I got. Again, there's a lot of people who people like. When I've done this topic in the past, they're like, well, what about Richard? He could be, but unfortunately, again, Richard has people who love him, certainly, and follow his projects, and then a large group that despises him. He's polarizing. And so that doesn't fit. So who is that person? Who is the evangelist who can actually be, and and the thing that kind of, I don't want to say keeps me up at night, that depresses me in all this, because I do think the comics industry needs somebody like this, is, would this industry allow somebody like that to exist? I'm not sure they would. Again, I think unless you align heavily with one group at the expense of another, you're going to get people who, as soon as you're successful, are going to try and cut you. That's no good. Anyway, let me know if you have different thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.